Ash, welcome to Nova.
Glad to be here.
It's been great that you've been able to spend a couple of days with us. I'm sure our team have really relished the opportunity to learn from the master, so to speak. Probably like a lot of people, I came to your work through the Lean Canvas, and then I read Running Lean, and then I read Scaling Lean. And I suppose it's interesting that last night when we were having dinner, you were explaining to me that actually Scaling Lean is really a prequel to Running Lean. So it shows how little I know, because I hadn't worked that out. But I believe you've got another piece of work in the offing that is a further prequel. Yes. Yeah. So tell me a bit about that.
Yeah. So if you look at what started Running Lean, it was really this whole notion of getting outside the building, because the answers are really out there. So a lot of the early works of Steve Blank, customer development, Lean Startup, kind of got us thinking that way. And so Running Lean was very much focused on how do we stop building and start understanding what customers need. And so that was step one. The thing that I then learned is that when you came back with some of that validation, the investors still didn't see the business model, they couldn't visualize the business model. You only talk to 10 people, you talk to 20 people, this is 100,000.
Yeah, is that meaningful?
Users.
Does it need to be 100 people?
So how does that scale up there?
We've experienced that problem firsthand with our own investment committee, where someone said, actually, we want to see 500 users.
Yeah.
Like, well, really?
So it was trying to reconcile that, and so but the message that I got was that we need the next part of the story, which is talking about traction. So doing the Excel magic wizardry stuff was not any better, because you come up with this fantastical model. So we need a simpler model where we can say we have done some small scale validation, but here's how it extrapolates to something bigger. So that's why Scaling Lean was the second book I wrote. And the reason it's a prequel is because that stuff has to happen sooner. I find that people sometimes get lost in getting outside the building, and they spend 6 months doing problem validation, and then they come back and prove to themselves that the market was just too small. They could have sometimes done that.
So we found a great problem to solve, but actually it's not worth solving.
Not worth solving, that's right. Yeah. So that's why it was not just find problems, but find problems worth solving.
Yeah. And that makes sense. I think part of our early investment process is not only are we looking for problems, but market sizing is important for us. You've got to establish early on that it's worth solving. So we're in agreement with that, definitely. Yeah. So what's the next?
As to the third one, it maybe dissects problem worth solving. So there was the adding the word solving to it, which was important. But then the problem piece itself, it's one of the things that we stumble into a lot, is we find entrepreneurs are just inherently in love with solutions. Yeah. And so when you say, go and do problem discovery, how you do it matters, because otherwise you just fool yourself. You just say, I want to build a hammer. I'll just go and ask people if they want a hammer. Or I'll pretend not to.
Show people loads of nails and ask them.
Yeah, there we go. I may not even bring up the word hammer, because you said I couldn't, but then I'll show you
pictures of nails.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So we bias them in many, many ways, and we are looking for justification to build the thing we do want to build. And so I kind of took a step back and again stumbled into other pieces of work, jobs to be done, and some outcome-driven type of thinking. Reached out to some of those thought leaders, kind of did some collaborative projects with them, and actually came up with what I think is a problem discovery technique, which doesn't require the kind of validation that I was advocating for in Running Lean. We've been actually working through that with a lot of your team. They're actually interviewing each other, and it'll be good to see what they think.
The outcomes of that are, yeah.
But it's a different way. So we don't start with problems. We actually back into problems, and it creates a much better, more open.
So is this more like, why are we solving the problem kind of approach?
So it takes a different approach. So rather than saying, I want to solve a problem for X, we try to figure out how are people using a product and where are they struggling. And then from there, the problems become rather apparent.
So you're almost like looking at poor existing alternatives.
Yeah. So one of the examples I gave even earlier was the cassette tape. If you had asked people what's wrong with the cassette tape or what's wrong with the taxi, people would say not much is wrong. But if you just observe them, you look at how people order taxis and all the anxiety they have when a taxi doesn't show up, the wrong taxi shows up, when what they expect the taxi to cost is not what it costs. All those are problems.
Points of pain.
Points of pain. And then if you design Uber or ride sharing, where you give people an app and say you can pick the car you want, you can see it on a map, it reduces all of that.
Yeah, okay.
So it's kind of studying those kinds of behaviors. You look at the cassette tape. People love the cassette tape, but finding a song, good luck. You wind forward, and you come out with a CD, and you're like, look, instant access.
Yeah.
So that kind of thinking. So it's not like go invent the CD. It's more like let's
looking at segments that are served by products, but are probably poorly served when you get under the cover.
Yeah. So I'm calling that the innovator's gift. So we have the innovator's bias, which is I have a hammer. What problems can I solve with it? The innovator's gift is going and seeing what other tools are people using. Does a hammer need to exist as a tool?
Yeah. If I didn't have this hammer, what tool would I build?
That's right.
That's interesting. So, but again, it's another set of activities that are not building. And I know you were at a product management conference in Dublin this week, and product managers and product people are focused on product and on build. And if I look at our organisation, we employ nearly 200 people, and probably 2/3 of them are builders of stuff. They're engineers, hardware engineers, software engineers, designers, product managers. And when people ask me about our business, there's two things that are front and central for me. One is it's finding problems worth solving, and then second, it's searching for a viable business model that allows you to monetize the solutions of those products. So that's clear for me, but most of our team inherently want to build stuff, are the founders of the businesses we co-found businesses with. They've got innovators bias, and and people, it's, well, how much prototype am I going to get for my money? And the focus keeps coming back to build. It's a challenge for us. What's your advice in terms of dragging people away from build and into the other phases? What do you think about that?
So that is a bit of it's a challenge, but it's a mindset that has to be developed. So for me, the way I sometimes talk about my trigger was getting to this point of realizing that life's too short to keep building something nobody wants. Right? I'd done that way too many times.
This was when you were as a software engineer.
I've
done exactly the same. I spent my 20s building stuff no one wanted.
Right. So I'd built dozens of products, and all were amazing when they started out. All. Some of them were successful, but the ones that weren't, I was like, this looked amazing when it started out. What was different?
And I bet the code quality was great, and the architecture was
fully
brilliant.
Tested. So that's so we polished these things, and they just
we call them highly polished golden turds, basically.
There we go. Yes.
I thought I'll say it for you. But
Yes. And so that's the trap that we fall into. So there needs to be some kind of awareness, but then on the other side, for me, the way that I kind of, you can say, tricked myself, but that's what led to running Lean, was looking at the business model as the product. And to me, that was very empowering. That why can't I build channels? Why can't I build, why can't I test pricing and build the business model just like I spend so much time in solution? What if we did those types of activities?
Yeah.
So that was a little kind of mindset shift that helped me kind of get over.
Trying to get people to understand that the business model is the product.
Is the actual product.
So
again, more easily said than kind of practiced. But as far as like the kind of building, the other thing I talk about is let's go and build customers first. So before we build products, to avoid building something nobody wants, we can show you how to test a product without building it. But you're still going to have to design it. You're still going to have to build maybe a prototype or a demo. That's work you're going to have to do anyways. All we're asking you to do is keep building, but at different points get feedback. And if the feedback is positive, then keep building and show more, and keep building and show more. But if it's not, stop. And then go back a few steps. So that's the way that we encounter it. Is that
keep people focused that you're building a viable business model, and the actual features that are being delivered along the way are always in support of that business model, as evidenced by user feedback.
Exactly. So and the way we sometimes, even so in the product manager conference, and happily a bunch of even those teams are coming around to this dual track mode of doing kind of discovery and validation in a dual track. It's a continuous process. So it's not like let's go and gather requirements and then just go away in the castle and build.
Because then otherwise customer discovery just becomes a different term for requirements analysis. So
the only way that it can work is it has to be discovery and dual track. So if you kind of think of, and there are a lot of practices out there like Agile, Scrum. They're still very much about gather a bunch of requirements like waterfall and then go away and pretend to iterate on those big requirements. But we say, no, go and keep checking the requirements and then using validation, keep ensuring that you're building the right
So
thing.
you've still kind of got a requirements and build sort of cycle, but it's tight.
But it's
You
all
just-
cycle,
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So another bugbear of mine. I mean, the word accelerator, and then the preponderance of accelerators. There's accelerators everywhere. Everyone has an accelerator. Every bank has an accelerator. Every university has an accelerator. There's probably one good one, and that's Y Combinator. From what I can, maybe I'm doing a disservice to some others, but in my mind, that they're the one. I kind of have a bit of a problem with them, really. You know, I'm a big advocate of customer discovery. How do you do customer discovery when you've got someone on a 12-week accelerator program? Like, you know, are these things, are they immiscible liquids, or?
So I guess when I was starting out, there were only 5 accelerators that you could count on your fingers. Now there are 5,000 or even more than that. Yeah. And part of it is in response to this explosion. So we are seeing an explosion at the very top of the funnel. I read this metric, 100 million ideas start up every year. So that's just a crazy amount. So sure enough, people are like, oh, this is the gold rush. We should just all...
Let's try and accelerate them all.
That's going to do that. Unfortunately, good ideas are rare. So when there were only 5, because competition was good, that was how you filtered out many of the other ones, and only
so the cream kind of rose to the top because there was less acceleration available, I guess. Yeah.
Right, but as we're seeing more of these ideas in the early stage, the failure rate is a lot higher. So if you look at overall success rate, it's actually gone down. Yeah. And 10 weeks is just not enough time to accelerate an early stage idea. It's not possible. Yeah. So many of these accelerators are having to add a pre-accelerator component, which is 6 or 9 months, and then the business model for many of them breaks, because who's going to fund that, who's going to pay that. You have a very creative way of doing that, which works for you, but many people struggle.
I mean, you mentioned the term pre-accelerator to me last night, and I think actually that does fit with what we're doing. You know, I agree. I don't think you can do. You're just hostage to fortune trying to do customer discovery in a 12-week period. From my view, it needs to take as long as it's going to take. Yep. So if you can give someone a year, then so much the better. So I like this pre-accelerator term, and maybe it's something we need to build into our vocabulary. Who are you seeing that's doing that well?
People are, so there are a few organizations that we have worked with. There's Propel in Canada. Now they get money from the government, but they have this recognition that we are going to be patient. It's not about the ideas, it's about the people. So they've also built a screening funnel at the very beginning. So they allow really anyone to come and learn about them, but they have to do certain activities. And one of them is like, if you have an idea, pitch it on a lean canvas, show us the story. So it's, don't just come and give us a 5-minute video, come and do it in a certain way. So they are creating a bit of sign-up friction, but that then allows the people who do make it past that point to be just slightly ahead. So so you mentioned Y Combinator. Y Combinator has this startup school. 10,000 people go through it.
They were self-educating.
They're self-educating. They're buying into the Y Combinator process. And when they come out, they want so bad to be in, and so they really are ready for it.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not quite as illustrious as Y Combinator, but it's what you're describing sounds a bit like our mentor phase, really, where we're getting people that they've got an idea, or they may have be thinking about it in terms of the problem they want to solve. They may not be, but in terms of gating people, so providing them with information about our methodology and about how we work, and kind of setting people jobs to do. Right. And there's the main reason that we're really, there's 2 main reasons really. One is so that we can educate people about how we're going to work, because they're going to have to work how we work, because how we work works. Or in our view it does, so we're not going to change. But secondly, I think it's a people screening process. We're trying to work out people who'll do what they say they're going to do. Yes. Will go away and do the homework, think critically in the right way.
Yeah, and the big thing I see that you have is it's having a way of working. It's having a process, but then it's also having consistent mentoring. Yeah. So a lot of the accelerators use volunteer-based mentorship, which again just doesn't work, because you get the advisor paradox problem. The same idea could go to 10 different mentors and come up with 10 different recipes for how to make it work. Yeah. And that just causes chaos. Like, that's just not...
Yeah, and the other problem is it's going to come back to the hammer analogy. The advice that the business gets depends on the strengths of the advisor to a certain extent. Right. We've seen a business where we've put a good advisor in place, and we think so, and he is a good advisor, but very, very commercially focused, and very early on is into the commercial model. Now, that's not necessarily what we would advocate at that stage, but nonetheless, it's good advice.
Right.
But then if we had a different advisor, they might be focused more on user experience, or, so that's the difficulty, isn't it?
That's the love of solutions. It's the curse of specialization. Yes. If you go to an advisor who is technical, they'll tell you
about engineering,
all the stuff, engineering stuff you could do. So that's why what we try to focus in on when we do advising, I think you practice the same as more of a Socratic method. It's really, here's a process. We can ask the right questions.
Yeah.
You have to figure out the answer. We can help you.
We can't do it for you.
But we're not going to give you the solution because nobody knows yet. Yeah. So we have to discover. We can ask the right questions. Like, you have 0 customers and you want to build. That doesn't make sense. Let's switch that order.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff. Is where you have a consistent process.
The thing that we find that is nice about that as well is that you never end up telling anyone that their baby's ugly. It's people reach their own conclusions. You'll go, well, I'll tell you what, if you think that's a problem that dentists experience, go and find us 15 dentists that will, and people come back a month later and go, I could only find one.
Yeah.
And they kind of come to their own conclusions, which is great. And it is very lean because it prevents waste. I mean, it stops a lot of waste, which
and it's playing the long game. So to me, the short game is investing in ideas. The long game is investing in people. So if you can teach somebody how to validate an idea, that works for the next idea too.
And that's our messaging to our founders. It's just because you came to us with one idea and you've gone through our process and qualified out on one. If we liked you and you liked us, we're delighted to hear from you again. That's it's like a recurring customer, in some ways. I think the other thing that's really neat as well is that I think founders and entrepreneurs are in this really difficult position where all expectation of them is that they're really resilient and determined and hardworking, and there's no obstacle that isn't insurmountable, and. So they're ingrained with, I should not give up on this. But some things are just not good ideas.
If you look at it, and I think that's the myth of this, the mythical perseverant entrepreneur, the risk taker who jumps off a parachute or jumps off the cliff without a parachute, figures it out.
Most of them die, don't they?
But exactly. but if you look at even if you look at people like Richard Branson and you look at how they start businesses, they try to remove all the risk up front. When he was starting Virgin Airlines, he had a buyback clause. Like, if this airline fails, I'll give you back the planes. I won't owe you anything.
Sale or return.
So I mean, you want to cover your downside always. So to me, that's kind of a myth of, I have a bad idea, I'm going to brute force it. No, if it's a bad idea and you can validate it's bad or invalidate the idea.
And that's the thing, I think, to give people a framework within which to kind of gracefully fail, that's non-emotional for them. It's like, well, you know what? I did give that my best shot, but what we found out was that it's not a shot worth taking.
Yes.
But I know that now, so I can sleep easy that I did my best. And now I'm on to the next thing, which I think is important.
Right, and setting the right expectations. So when we work with teams, we tell them there's no silver bullet. Because if there were, this would be a process I wouldn't be just openly sharing. I'd be using it just for me.
But global takeover.
Yeah, exactly. But what we can do is give you a process where you have a clear go, no-go decision based on evidence that you will gather, and you will make those conclusions. And I think that's powerful.
Yeah, okay. And I know, I mean, so that's brilliant because it works for the individual. I know you've been telling me that you're gaining quite a lot of traction with your process with corporates in terms of corporate innovation. How well is it transferring into the corporate world?
So I often joke that startups struggle because they have the channel problem. They can't find enough customers usually. Big companies struggle, or when they start getting disrupted, they fail because they stop talking to their own customers. So you have kind of this massive kind of culture that you go up against. So it's early days. So there are so many corporates more on the innovation team side that are buying into the process. They're seeing the methodology. They're kind of getting it. The sort of left brain saying, yes, this makes sense. It's better than what we've seen before. But putting it into practice, that's kind of still early days. So we're getting traction with those teams and doing some of that early problem discovery, getting to MVP. Some of the challenges are when you bring it back in the big company, how does it reintegrate back? Who are the stakeholders? How do you operationalize it? So there are still challenges there, but to me it's more culture.
How do you make a safe pass back into the organization without kind of dropping the ball?
Yeah, and there have been many models. Like some big companies say we'll just work with startups, but then when you acquire a startup, the startup doesn't want to be in the big company. So again, it's always the culture of this kind of rapid, continuous innovation with the more mature, slower pace.
With continuous execution, almost within a bigger company. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. So what's next then? What does the future look like?
So we're kind of moving forward. So we talked about the prequels that I'm writing, but I think we're at a point now where we can tell a complete end-to-end story. I look at the early stage as being underserved, even though there are lots of ideas. I think with the right process, you can kind of get more success come out of that.
Well, I'm completely aligned with that, obviously.
And it's a long game. So we're very much focused on that. We're building kind of tools and even curriculum that teams can use to kind of walk through that path. Collecting a lot of data, giving data back to our users to maybe make smarter decisions. So that's kind of where our head's at. That's
so it's the next kind of tooling, data, community. Sounds really impressive and exciting.
I think the future is fun. I think we're living through this renaissance that I often like to describe it as this entrepreneurial renaissance. More ideas than ever before.
And the barriers to entry are so low now. You know, cloud compute and you know the gig economy, etc. You know, I think you're right. The ability to execute on ideas is better than ever before. I suppose the key is to listen to people like yourself and work out which ideas are worth executing on, you know.
And even the worth piece, I think there are some who only chase unicorns, and I think we talked about this even last night, is that there is such a big middle that is underserved, where you don't have to build the next unicorn. If every country in the world could just create more entrepreneurs solving local problems, I think we can make the world a better place.
No, I completely agree. Well, thanks for your insight. It's been great talking to you. And hopefully we'll welcome you back again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Andy.
Pleasure.
I don't even know what to say. I'm humiliated.